everyone, today we are taking a look at the Beta FPV Meteor 75 Pro. Wang! I do have the Walksnail edition, but that will be a separate video, and there's one point about that Walksnail edition that I'll hint to here, but we'll discuss more when I release that video. The flight controller is the F4 1S 5-amp all-in-one flight controller, which does have two different versions. The one I have here is of course Express LRS, but there's also an FR Sky version, but it's SPI. Got 1102 22,000 kV motors, and on those motors are 45mm props. The FPV camera is Beta FPV's own C03, and the VTX is Beta FPV's M03, which the specs say go up to 350 milliwatts, but the VTX tables on this one says up to 400. I trust the specs on the website. I think the VTX tables is off. Of course, it comes with the Beta FPV BT20 connector. If you're not much for the white canopy, they have other colors you can purchase. It does come with an extra set of props, some motor mounting screws, and a little tiny screwdriver. Also in the kit, we get the accessories that makes it look kind of like an old knight's helmet on the top where those slots are, a battery charger checker that is run via USB-C, as well as these mounts for the camera, I think, are different angles. As you can see with mine, I believe that's the highest angle that it can go, at least without getting the canopy in view. And of course, with the USB charger, you gotta have a USB cable. And of course, it comes with the obligatory card for support and other information. It weighs just about 31 grams. The recommended battery is a new 550 milliamp 1S battery. I believe Beta FPV might be one of the few that has these, but hopefully you can find other vendors as well. And with that battery, it brings our flying weight up to just, well, it's 45 grams. Motor post to motor post, I'm getting pretty close to 82 millimeters. This is compared to the Meteor 65 Pro, which is running 35 millimeter props, but still measures 65 millimeters motor post to motor post. And next to the Mo Beetle in a different frame, which is a traditional 65 millimeter, 31 millimeter propped hoop. And last but not least, we've got a Mobulus 7. And you can see the size difference. It's kind of substantial, and it sticks in my mind when I'm flying too. So you've already seen some of the inside flight. That was my speed run. That's not how I fly all my different flights. That's kind of a way I can test durability because I crash a lot, and it's also a way I can test myself, push my own skills to fly faster. Faster because, well, that's kind of the flight style that I like. I lack a little bit of that creativity when it comes to doing tricks and seeing opportunities for doing tricks. If you want to see somebody fly their own build that's running 45mm props, I suggest heading over to the Infinity Loops channel. Heads did a 45mm prop build, and he is quite a freestyler. So if that's the sort of flight you want to look for, that's the place to go. I am running 200 milliwatt on the VTX on this because I found as you get near the bottom of the battery, that apparently the 5-volt rail or the VTX and its demands at 400 milliwatts, you start to get really severe breakup. It's not unflyable, but it's definitely noticeable. I found that I moved it down to 200 milliwatts, and then that would essentially go away through the bottom of the battery. And you'll note that as we get deeper into this flight, that I have adjusted the battery warnings. I adjusted my min value way down so that when I come in, I can disarm and land and the battery recover to 3.5 volts on average. So sometimes I would come in a little bit late and then I'd have to change my timing. But I think in this flight, we're going to see that the battery actually comes in at like 3.6 volts, and that's what I usually try to do on this channel to maximize not just the flight time, but so that those people that run the same way I do, some of maybe our veterans out there, that you'll have a pretty good idea of what sort of flight time you can get based upon the flight style. You know, we all have our own different flight style and flight spaces, so that helps, I think, bring additional consistency to the channel. You can see we're about 1 minute and 47 in, and our battery does dip down below 3.5 volts from time to time. I think this is going to be the one that people, the whoop that is, that people will want that primarily fly outside in really small spaces, or they have a larger indoor space. I actually thought the Meteor 65 Pro, so 65 millimeters still, but 35 millimeter props, had a better PID tune on it. It had a little bit more of a quick response, which for my flight style fit fairly well. The PID tune on this isn't bad by any stretch, especially when you see the outside flights with the rolls and the flips that I do to kind of show that PID tune on whether it's got any bounce back or it's loose. It just felt a little bit like it wasn't tracking quite as well as the Meteor 65 Pro. But that's just me. It could be getting used to a new size as well. You know, I fly a lot of 75mm, 40mm prop quads in the house, so maybe that's just the difference in going up to this size. Of course, I don't think if you have a small place this is going to be very viable, but if you have a good-sized indoor space, certainly, you know, an indoor space such as an office or a warehouse or something along those lines, it'll fly and you'll have a lot of fun, hopefully. And I found that through all my indoor testing that, yeah, it can take some abuse. At least in my case, I found that, you know, probably through my 40 or so indoor flights, I only had 2 outdoor flights. My weather has been grossly bad, and you'll see a little bit of that in a moment here. But the flight has ended. You can see as we go back to the home screen, 3.64, 3.65 volts, 3 minutes and 19 seconds. I will say that in one of my flights that I was thinking about using, that I got a flight time of 3 minutes and 45 seconds indoors. So the flight time is going to vary a little bit. Here we jump into the outdoor space. This is very overcast. I guess you could say 100% overcast. You can see the pool cover has got rain on it. We've had rain for days, either in part of the day. But I was getting kind of desperate to go outside and fly. It was actually reasonable as far as the wind goes. It wasn't howling like it has been. We had winds. There is some wind. Weatherman says 10 miles an hour. Of course, in town, behind the trees and the fence, you don't get the full force of 10 miles an hour. But if you see some wobbles or some shakes or you hear some noises, you could probably hear the wind on my audio camera that's sitting on the table. We have to account for that in the flight as well. It wasn't bad, but there's a section along the fence run that kind of blew me towards the fence, and you kind of see me make a correction for that. But flying it outside, I'm actually kind of flying a little bit cautiously because we've got all this water laying around. But I've been flying this and the walk snail version inside for over a week. And I was like, man, when is the weatherman going to cooperate? I've had some problems getting some other things outside to fly as well. So I thought I'd take a shot and risk it. I'd say that I was flying cautiously mainly because I certainly have the idea that the grass is all wet. I've got pool cover water. There's got to be other puddles sitting out in the yard and in various places, especially underneath the canopy, that I'm certainly not going all out. But I was desperate to go outside, and it doesn't look like the weather's going to be improving much, at least in the 10-day forecast I looked at just this morning. Didn't look to be improving all that much in the next 5 to 6 days. Of course, you know, weather can always change and they can definitely be wrong. This particular day, it was supposed to be 70 degrees, but nope, that did not happen. 55, I believe, was the high. But of course, outside flight is going to be more important for this one because it's bigger. Some people have asked for the Meteor 65 Pro outside flight. I haven't gotten to that yet. I had a short amount of time in this little time gap to do this one, so I did. We have a little bit of a mixed flight between using the larger space as well as just kind of using some smaller spaces, doing some close proximity. This kind of simulates when I used to have that playground. You remember that? The longtime viewers will remember the playground or the swing set that used to sit out there, and I used to swing, zooming in and out of that from time to time on these quads about this size. It was a lot of fun, and I do miss it myself. Mom and I, or my wife and I, have been talking about doing some project out in that area to kind of enhance the livable area. So we'll see how that comes along. I just don't think it'll be this year. I think we've got project fatigue. Again, I've got the camera angle at the highest mount point. It is not adjustable as far as being on a screw. You have to take the canopy apart. You've got to unscrew the mount for the camera. You've got to take your new or lower angled camera mount, slide the camera down into that, screw it back up into the canopy, and then screw the canopy down back to the frame in order to be able to change the camera angle, which is kind of a bummer. I certainly am an advocate of adjustable camera angle because I think it's so critically important. Everybody has different desires, different needs. If you want to fly a little bit slower and just cruise and explore, you want a lower camera angle. If you want to really go all out and go plaid, as I like to say, you need a higher camera angle. You're not going to get much higher than this. I showed it in the quick specs, but I think if you get much higher, you're going to see much more of the canopy in the camera, at least in the analog version. The Walksnail version does have a screw in its canopy, so a screw mount for its camera. So you can adjust that one to your heart's desire within the housing of the canopy will allow. Okay, we're going to come in here in just a second. I'm going to actually end up crashing, but because I only had two 550 milliamp batteries that I could use on each one of these quads, I had to kind of cut it there. You see our batteries bouncing back up at 3.6 volts. We got 3 minutes and 46 seconds, which is actually longer than we did inside. So that gives you an idea of flight time. I'm going to keep myself over on the right-hand side over here, because over here I want to play one. When you see the VTX breakup that is different, you might have to go back and reference my initial flight that I did in this video. Of course, that was on 200 milliwatts, but what I want to show you is when you're running 400 milliwatts and you get down towards the bottom of the battery where I was actively flying, that the breakup becomes much more severe. And that actually is going to come to play a role in the Walksnail version as well. If you're interested in the Walksnail version, I'll link it down in the video description below, especially with this one, but the video for that one's probably going to come out a few days after this one. I would caution you at the very least to wait for that video. I think that there's an important detail about how you're going to be able to fly that, how aggressively you're going to be able to fly that. Hopefully I'm showing that VTX issue that I found when running 1S and actually flying the battery down below 3.5 volts. So if you want maximum range, you're going to have to back off your flight time and keep your battery above, say, 3.44 volts in order to be able to fully power that VTX and get the 400 milliwatts out of it without a bunch of extra breakup. I mentioned it already, but there's no screw mount for quick adjustable camera angle on this one. You can see there for my canopy, the actual outer ring is kind of right up against the edge of the canopy up there. You can see the mount right there, so I already described it. Unscrew these 3 points, and the canopy's holding well, no jiggle or bobble. Of course, it was a full overcast day, not full sun, so that would be another thing I would like to test, but it's not going to happen at least for a week, just because it doesn't look like we're going to have flyable, or at least whoop flyable, outdoor fly time over the course of the next 5+ days. But in my opinion, they've gotten better at creating a canopy that has just 3 screw mount points. Now, one thing I would caution you about is you can see the antennas out here. I didn't have any problems, and it's probably because the antenna is kind of right up against the crotch of the canopy here. But maybe you kind of have a choice to make. You might want to take some E6000 and dab it around the UFL. Now, if you get something that tugs on this, that could mean that the UFL connector on that VTX, that M03 VTX, gets pulled off. I haven't had any troubles using non-hardening sorts of glue like welders or E6000 on my UFLs, but you know, that varies. I've seen a lot of reports of people pulling UFLs off. I'm not quite certain how that happens because I've never experienced that, so I throw that out there as a word of caution. But you know, it's something else that you need to contend to. I had a lot of crashes. Also, hopefully I'm done and I'm playing my dive testing video right over here. That's another thing that people like to see when it comes to whoops is dive testing. So I spent one battery, again a 550 milliamp Beta FPV battery, because it's the only 550 milliamp batteries. No, my Xylo batteries are 550s, but they're not BT20, they're PH20, so I couldn't use those. I did, I don't know, 6, 8 dives, whatever. You can see them up there, and my recollection was there was 2 of them that kind of did the yaw washout. And if you're not familiar with the yaw washout, so you're coming down for a dive, and then at some point it pitches up and usually yaws around one way or another. And it does that not on command, so you're not in control of that. I've been through it so many times that I can really recover from that, but it can be shocking if you haven't experienced it before, that you're just diving along down, and depending upon how far your dive is, you may find it goes whoop, whoop, right around, and you're like, whoa, what happened? You know, and then you've got to make corrections on the sticks. A question that comes up often, though there's no audio on these quads, I use a secondary camera. I'm actually using it to film right now, and I set it on a table, and I record the audio, and then I bring the audio as well as the DVR into the flight footage. That's how I get that, so don't be confused. Okay, let's talk about batteries a little bit. So the Beta FPV 550s are the recommended battery, and it's what you saw on these flights. The 450s fit fine. The tiny Whoop 450s fit fine as well, and I actually found that they held their voltage better than the 450s, something to be considered there, even though these batteries, I think, are just a touch more in weight because of the larger connector or the larger plastic end on here for this tiny whoop battery. I also have some Weebleed FPV batteries, but they are thinner batteries, and I found on crashes that I would get ejections from time to time, but I'll show you how they all fit. Again, it fits pretty snug, but when you've got something this size and you're carrying that much speed and inertia with its weight, what was it, 45 grams, I think it was, all at flight weight, and you have a crash, because I would route the Beta or the Weebleed FPV batteries this away, and then I would connect, and I fly forward mostly, and then the battery would shoot out and it would disconnect. So I had that happen a couple times. So while I did use these and they're really high quality batteries, in this particular case, you might want to look at Weebleed FPV site and see if they have a stick battery like this rather than an extension. I don't have those. The Tiny Whoop batteries do fit as well, and they're shorter, which means your weight distribution might be a bit off. Oh, something else. So when you see down here how this lead comes over here, so and I've got some twists in there, and I created those twists in the battery lead so that when I plug it in, this battery lead doesn't get up into the prop, because that's something that we've seen a bunch of different times, that they've got enough battery lead to get your battery connected, then sometimes it can end up right in the prop line, either just enough so you're grazing the wire, or you can actually chop the wire from time to time. So in order to keep that from happening, I just put a couple of turns to shorten this cable out so it wouldn't have the reach up into the prop area. But the Tiny Whoop battery, good battery, and it works and fits. Of course, the Beta FPV 450 is going to fit as well. There are probably others that fit as well, but I'm not trying them all. 550s are the same size as the 450s. Let's go ahead and measure these 550s just so you get an idea. So 16 millimeters wide, let's say, and 6.5 millimeters tall. And just in case if somebody's wondering, we got, over 68.5 millimeters front to back. So something else that I tried to do, because again, I have two of these, there's a little bit of space that looks like, I don't know if you can see that in camera, where the prop hub is not all the way down on the motor bell. I did try to shove these down, but I didn't want to get all real heavy-handed, but I couldn't get them down any further. So this might be the extent of how far you can push the props down. And for those that don't know, I like to have the props touching the motor bell because that decreases on impact that you'll bend a motor shaft. Of course, these are 1.5 millimeter motor shafts, so I would hope that we bend a prop before we bend a shaft. And again, I had a lot of crashes inside, and I had that one minor crash outside. No issues. You can see I've got a nick in this prop. There's a nick in that prop. Plenty of, well, there's a little bit of dirt and debris here around the edges, but I didn't fly it outside that much just because our weather wasn't cooperating. And if this is big for you, I would highly encourage you to look at the Meteor 65 Pro. Much smaller, in my opinion, much more indoor friendly. Still does not have an adjustable camera angle with the screw. You have to change out the mounts in order to get different camera angles. The components outside of the motors, props, and frames are all about the same, or they are exactly the same. I think for me and my flight style, this is going to be something that I keep around versus this would be, it's not bad. I think it's just specific enough that you have a particular outdoor space that you're going to fly with this. But if you've got the skills and the flight space inside, it's a load of fun. It flies well. It just, in my opinion, as far as just flight, not measuring flight time or any speed or anything like that, the 65 just feels better in the air. So I will link this review video down in the video description, as well as the links to this one as well, because I think if you're looking at these, you're probably looking more outdoor here, and you're probably looking more indoor here, due to the size, the power, how manageable it is. Throttle management inside can be a challenge when it comes to whoops. So yeah, I think it's a lot of fun. For me, it's not my favorite over the 65 with 35 millimeter props. This is actually, I've actually got a build of one, not quite together over here. I want to make a lighter one, see if I can go even more plaid. Again, the walk snail version, I think it's going to be important that you see that. I tried to talk about this one a little bit in this video. It's really not fair because I don't think you're looking at the analog if you've got walk snail, but maybe. So we'll get to this as soon as I can. I've got most of the flights taken care of. I think I need to review the flight footage yet. Sometimes I have flight audio issues, so then I have to go back and redo things. We'll see how that goes. I've got a bunch of flights on this one as well. I don't want to hit this too hard. I just think if you're looking at this, don't get sucked in by the hype of something new and the props. I'm not saying this isn't fun or it isn't no good, but my concern is that if you get excited about something because maybe something you saw in this video or another video, or you saw some marketing materials online, you need to have the right sort of space. So I don't think you want to have a big outdoor space, nor do I think you want to have a small indoor space in order to fly this. But if you've got the skills like Heads over at Infinity Loops, or OG, or Rab, or Tyrant, or geez, there's so many outstanding Whoop pilots out there that have come through IGAO and been IGAO champions and are now IGAO team pilots and Tiny Whoop team pilots. I'm sure they can all manage this inside just about any space and pull off some mind-bending tricks. But for me, and possibly you, this might require more large indoor space and maybe smaller outdoor space. Maybe. But it's all here for you to look at. You get to choose. Again, I'll have links to this one and the Walksnail version and the Meteor75 Pro version down in the video description. You can choose whichever one you want if you want any of them. If you have any comments, questions, suggestions, or otherwise, please let me know in the comments section below. I appreciate your time, and thanks for watching.